Hey there, my ladies of High Point. Hope you're doing great today. So I wanted to do a quick supplemental video because as I was preparing to do this week's video overview for next week's reading, I had some questions and I wanted to get better clarity, understanding. So I started digging and doing more research and getting more clarity. And I wanted to bring that to you. So as you're reading through the remaining parts of the Bible, and right now specifically depending on when you're watching this video, we're in the Gospels right before Holy Week. And I think it's important to get a clearer understanding of what's happening culturally speaking, because it's one thing for us to read about what we've likely read about maybe all of our lives, if you're anything like me growing up in the church, but really getting an understanding of the cultural background and the significance that it carries really carries some weight. It makes a big difference and clarifies understanding of why things were done a certain way and just the plan that God already had in place. So I want to highlight 4 main things that I've been learning and I want to share with you. I don't have all the answers, not even anywhere near close, but I want to share what I've been learning with you. So this is the intertestamental period, which is between Malachi and Matthew, between the Old Testament and the New Testament. I've made mention of it in the past, but I just wanted to do a separate video just on this so we can get a better understanding of what's going on. So it's called the silent years. God was always and has always been at work. This 400 to 500 year period is no different at all. And so I like to think of it as like God, the Lord, preparing the world for the entrance of Christ in the flesh. And so Christ coming in the flesh, the world has to be ready for him, right? And he came right at the right time. And so there's some things that had to happen before he came. And so those areas that are going to be influenced are really in the area of the landscape, the leadership, and also the language. All this plays a big part of Christ coming into the world at the right time, and his time in coming that everything would be going in the way, in the time that God set it out to be. So with that being said, I want to go over 4 points, have my little notes here. But the first one is Alexander the Great. I'm sure we've all heard of Alexander the Great, even in public school, right? You've read about that. This is happening. He came to rule over the known world at that time during this intertestamental period, okay? And he was a Greek and he was raised in Greek culture, philosophy, and language. And so he wanted everybody to be speaking even the same language. And so this is where first Koine Greek was taught, which is common Greek, and it was easier to learn and understand. So everybody in the known world was under his rulership and spoke Koine Greek. This is in addition to the Jews. And so with that being said, after he died, there were 4 of his generals that took over like a quarter of the known world. So they had 4 different kingdoms. They too continued to push that Greek agenda, making sure the language was being spoken the same across the known world at that time. And so during this time, so that's the first thing. And then the second thing was the successors. And what they ended up doing was, one of them in particular was over Jerusalem, Israel, took the Torah, because everyone was speaking, including the Jews, were speaking Greek, and they wanted to make sure that was accessible to them. And so they translated it into Greek. In the Torah, which is the Old Testament, in Greek it's called the Septuagint. Okay, so that's how the Septuagint even came into being. So that was the second thing. Now this is important to know as well too. Okay, so this is the language being spread. Now this language is going to be the language that the gospel is going to be spread in. So the Lord is so good and omniscient in knowing what needs to be done for his good news to be sent out. So all this, like Alexander the Great, he's playing a role, didn't even know he was playing a role. All this was just God setting it up. So then the third thing I want to go over is, so during this time, of course, Jews were still being hated. They remember the time when they had, their ancestors had land, like they had they had the southern kingdom, they had the northern kingdom. God gave them this land and they acted a fool. They didn't act right. The kings were doing what they wanted to do, ended up, ignoring God's warnings, and then were taken off to Babylon, and then Babylon was conquered by the Assyrian Empire. So here they are, and then they did end up coming back. We read about that, but they had to rebuild, and then so now all these things are happening. So they've never gotten back to that place that God gave them originally. And so that's what they're longing for and hoping for, because they're still being mistreated, like they're being killed because they're a threat to the Greek culture. So it ends up where Israel is just like, they just had enough, and there's a group of them, they start a revolt in 167 BC. That means 167 years before Christ even comes. So we're getting closer and closer and closer to Christ coming in the flesh. And then this revolt, they ended up winning in this revolt, and that was in 130 BC. So that we're getting closer. 130 years before Christ comes. And then for 80 years, they have an independent state by themselves, like again, in their independent state. And then the Roman government comes and then they overtake them. So the Roman military was the mightiest, biggest, baddest military there is in the known world at that time. So they overtake the Greeks. But the Greek culture overtakes the Roman people, right? So you have Rome in charge, but like the Greek culture has infiltrated the Roman Empire. Okay, so the Greeks have all these different gods, the god of knowledge, the philosophies, and all these different things, the philosophers. And so, but still, the Jews are still a threat to even the Roman Empire, because the Roman Empire wants them to bow to them, their God, how it's always been. That's never been any different. So Rome is not here for the Jews at all. And so there's a guy named Herod. They put him over Israel. And so they call him the king of the Jews. Now, Herod is not really like Jewish, like he's like half-breed, but he was raised Jewish. His parents, Judaism was forced upon them and they converted to Judaism, but he wasn't Jewish in heart at all. He served other gods, but he tried to make it look like he was like for the Jews, but he was building other temples for other gods in Rome at the same time. So a lot of the Jews, they just looked at him as like a Roman puppet, like he just did what they asked him to do, but he really wasn't truly Jewish. So I want you to be clear about these different leaders. Like, so Herod was known as Herod the Great. He was that first Herod there. Now, Herod the Great had a son, and his son was Herod the Tetrarch, or King Herod. And King Herod is the one who beheaded John the Baptist as well as crucified our Savior. Okay, this is King Herod. Okay, and then he has a son, and that's Herod Agrippa. Herod Agrippa is who we read about in Acts. And then he was the last one of the Herodian dynasty, and it's over at that point. But just so we're clear that the Herods are not always the same, so just the timeline makes a difference too. And so that just gives us some insight into what's going on. So when he was put over them as ruler, he wanted to please the Jews. Like he was like, I am Jewish. And so he goes and builds the temple, which is Herod's temple, which is, he's building it according to the customs and to what the Lord said to do it as, but he's just doing that for the people because he wants to please them. But he was also building other temples for other gods. He wasn't for real about God. Okay, so that's important to know that, because as we come up on Holy Week, you'll have a better understanding of the heart of the rulers of what's going on. And so at this time when Jesus comes on the scene, I'm just kind of fast forwarding a little bit. When he does come on the scene, like, the Jewish people, they've been waiting. We just came off of this 80-year, independent state that was great. And, our ancestors, we had our own land. We want to get back to that. And they've been reading about the prophecy of the coming king, and they're going to have their own land again. They're like, yes. Like, this is what we want. And so they're expecting whoever this Messiah is to come and overtake and throw out and crush the Roman government and then have his rule. And then they're going to be reigning and ruling with him because that's their king. So Jesus, he does not fit the description, although he's telling them this is who I am. They're just like, okay, so then if this is who you are, then you're definitely going to be about that life and like pounce on the Roman government. But that's not how it was set up. So we're going to get to that point, kind of jumping ahead. But just so you can understand the mindset of the people, and that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to have a better understanding of the mindset of the people, of the Jewish people when Jesus came. Like, they were the ones who were following him, were really looking for that Messiah and to get from under the hand of the Roman Empire. This is important to understand. Now, in addition to that, last thing I want to say, number 4, how God used this intertestamental period to prepare the world for Jesus in the flesh to come and to step into time, from timelessness into time. So while the Romans were ruling, once again, preparing the world for Christ, they were expert engineers in building. And so they built all these roads that led back to the center. So right at this point, the Roman Empire is over the known world. Okay, and so they paved all these roads, and this was the advancement. This was made by the advancement of the Roman Empire. They didn't know that these 370 roads that connected back to the main center, and the over 80,000 miles that were paved, that they paved with manpower, they didn't know that they were doing all this so the gospel could be spread throughout the world in literally 70 years. Like, they didn't know that God was preparing the world for Christ to come in the flesh. So I just wanted to share these 4 things with you. I hope it's encouraging to you, and just so you can get a better understanding as we're reading through the Gospels, as we read through the New Testament, we can see like the cultural nuances and the understanding of what the Jews were really wanting, why they're wanting that, the history, the cultural implications of what that, and the significance of what that means as well. So enjoy it. Maybe you need to run it back, replay, take some notes, and then when you go listen or watch and read the New Testament again, you can even have more clarity as God is glorified through our understanding. All right, God bless.